Jealous billionaire mother-in-law pours hot water on bride. She didn't know who she was dealing with. Listen, you're not ready for what happened at this wedding. A billionaire mother-in-law, blinded by jealousy, poured boiling water on her son's bride, right there in front of hundreds of guests. But what she didn't know was that the woman she tried to destroy had a secret powerful enough to tear down her entire empire. You'll feel the shock, the betrayal, and the justice that follows. Stay with me, because by the end, you'll see how one moment of cruelty turned into the downfall of a dynasty. In the heart of New York City, where skyscrapers glitter like diamonds and fortunes are carved into steel and glass, the Whitmore family stood as royalty. Their empire stretched across luxury hotels, penthouses, and private islands. But behind the polished veneer of wealth, a storm was brewing. Margaret Whitmore, the widow of the late billionaire Charles Whitmore, was a woman both admired and feared. To the world, she was elegance personified, a matriarch who carried grief with grace. But to those who truly knew her, Margaret was pathologically possessive of her only son, Daniel. He wasn't just her child. He was her masterpiece, her heir, the living embodiment of everything she had fought to preserve. So when Daniel announced his engagement to Emily Carter, a brilliant young architect with a quiet strength, Margaret's smile was coldly rehearsed. To her, Emily wasn't a bride. She was an intruder, a rival, a thief who dared to steal her son's devotion. The wedding was set in a grand Manhattan ballroom, dripping with chandeliers, champagne fountains, and whispers of old money. Guests marveled at the glamour, but beneath the sparkle, Margaret was plotting. She had secrets buried deep. Whispers about her husband's mysterious death, manipulations of family members, and lies told for years to maintain her grip on power. And on the day of the wedding, Margaret would strike. She would humiliate Emily in front of everyone, remind Daniel who truly held the reins, and prove that no bride could ever replace her. But Margaret didn't know who she was dealing with. Emily had her own secret, one that would unravel the Whitmore dynasty forever. The morning of Daniel Whitmore's wedding dawned with the kind of brilliance only New York could offer, sunlight bouncing off glass towers, limousines gliding through Fifth Avenue, and a ballroom prepared to host the most extravagant celebration of the year. Guests arrived in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos, their conversations buzzing with anticipation. The Whitmore name carried weight, and everyone wanted to witness the union of the billionaire heir. Emily Carter, radiant in her ivory gown, stood poised yet nervous. She had dreamed of this day, but she knew it wasn't just a wedding, it was a battlefield. Margaret Whitmore's presence loomed like a shadow over every detail. From the floral arrangements to the seating chart, Margaret had insisted on control, disguising her obsession as tradition. Daniel, handsome and confident, tried to reassure Emily with a smile, but even he couldn't ignore the tension. His mother's eyes followed them everywhere, sharp and calculating, as though she were waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers, champagne fountains, and a string quartet playing softly in the background. Yet beneath the glamour, whispers circulated. Some guests remembered the mysterious circumstances of Charles Whitmore's death. Others speculated about Margaret's iron grip on the family fortune. And a few noticed the way Margaret's hand tightened around her champagne glass whenever Emily's name was mentioned. Margaret had rehearsed her plan. Today, she would remind everyone, especially Emily, who truly ruled the Whitmore dynasty. She would humiliate the bride in front of hundreds, ensuring Daniel never forgot where his loyalty belonged. But what Margaret didn't know was that Emily had come prepared. The bride carried a secret that would turn Margaret's carefully constructed empire into ashes. The Whitmore wedding was the talk of Manhattan, but beneath the glittering chandeliers and the polished marble floors, Margaret Whitmore's mind was consumed with one thought: humiliation. She had spent weeks rehearsing the moment, every detail carefully calculated. To Margaret, this wasn't just a wedding, it was a war for control. She watched Emily glide across the ballroom, her gown shimmering under the lights, her smile radiant as she greeted guests. Margaret's lips tightened. Every compliment Emily received felt like a dagger. Every admiring glance toward the bride was, in Margaret's mind, a betrayal of her authority. Margaret had chosen her weapon carefully. It wasn't a grand scandal or a whispered rumor. It was something physical, visceral, unforgettable. She had instructed the staff to prepare a silver teapot of scalding water, disguised among the trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. At the right moment, she would accidentally spill it across Emily's gown, burning her skin, humiliating her in front of hundreds. The bride would be scarred, not just physically, but socially. Margaret would remind everyone that no one, not even Emily, could challenge her dominance. Guests mingled, laughter filled the air, and the orchestra played a soft waltz. But Margaret's eyes never left Emily. She moved closer, her heels clicking against the marble, her hand tightening around the teapot's handle. Daniel was distracted, speaking with investors and family friends. Emily was alone, her back turned, her gown flowing like silk. Margaret's moment had arrived. She lifted the teapot, her heart pounding with anticipation. This was her strike, her proof of power. But what Margaret didn't know was that Emily had already anticipated her move. The bride wasn't as defenseless as she appeared. The orchestra's melody swelled as guests raised their glasses, unaware that the moment of destruction was seconds away. Margaret Whitmore, her eyes cold and calculating, tightened her grip on the silver teapot. Steam curled upward, invisible to most, but to Margaret it was the symbol of her dominance. Emily Carter stood near the grand staircase, her gown flowing like liquid ivory, her laughter soft as she greeted Daniel's college friends. She was radiant, vulnerable, and in Margaret's mind, dangerously close to stealing everything she had built. Margaret moved swiftly, her heels clicking against the marble floor. With a feigned stumble, she tilted the teapot forward. A stream of scalding water cascaded down, splashing across Emily's gown and skin. The bride gasped, her cry piercing through the music. Guests froze, horrified, as the orchestra faltered mid-note. The ballroom erupted. Women screamed, men rushed forward, and Daniel's face turned pale as he saw his bride clutching her arm, her gown ruined, her dignity shattered. Margaret, feigning innocence, widened her eyes. "Oh, how clumsy of me," she whispered, her voice dripping with false concern. But the guests weren't convinced. Whispers spread like wildfire. Some remembered Margaret's reputation for cruelty. Others recalled the rumors surrounding Charles Whitmore's death. And now, in front of hundreds, Margaret had revealed the darkness she tried so hard to conceal. Emily, trembling but composed, straightened her back. Her eyes locked onto Margaret's with a quiet fire. She didn't scream. She didn't collapse. Instead, she stood tall, her silence more powerful than any words. Margaret thought she had won, that she had humiliated Emily beyond repair. But what she didn't know was that this attack had triggered the bride's plan. Emily's secret was about to unravel everything. The ballroom was still buzzing with shock. Guests whispered in disbelief, some rushing to Emily's side, others glaring at Margaret with suspicion. The bride's gown was ruined, her skin reddened from the scalding water, yet Emily did not crumble. She stood tall, her posture regal, her silence louder than any scream. Daniel rushed forward, his voice trembling. "Emily, are you all right?" His hands hovered protectively, but Emily gently placed them aside. Her eyes never left Margaret. There was no rage, no tears, only a quiet, piercing strength that unsettled everyone who saw it. Margaret, feigning innocence, dabbed her lips with a napkin. "Such a dreadful accident," she murmured, her tone dripping with false sympathy. But her mask was cracking. The guests weren't convinced. The whispers grew louder. She did it on purpose. She wanted to hurt her. Emily's silence became her weapon. She didn't argue, didn't accuse. Instead, she allowed the room to draw its own conclusions. And in that silence, Margaret's power began to falter. The matriarch who had ruled with fear and manipulation now looked desperate, her control slipping through her fingers. Daniel's eyes darted between his mother and his bride. For the first time, he saw Margaret not as the grieving widow or the protective mother, but as a woman consumed by obsession. His loyalty wavered. Emily turned to the guests, her voice calm but firm. "I will not let this ruin our day," she said. "Love is stronger than cruelty." The room erupted in applause, the guests rallying behind her. Margaret clenched her fists, her plan unraveling before her eyes. She had tried to humiliate Emily, but instead, she had elevated her. and Margaret had no idea that Emily's true revenge was only beginning. The wedding reception carried on, but the atmosphere had shifted. Guests no longer looked at Margaret Whitmore with admiration. They looked at her with suspicion. The whispers grew louder, circling like smoke around the ballroom. Emily, her gown ruined but her dignity intact, moved gracefully among the guests. Every step was deliberate, every glance calculated. She wasn't just enduring humiliation, she was gathering strength. And as she listened, she began to hear the murmurs that Margaret had tried to bury for years. Charles Whitmore's death was never explained, one guest whispered. She controlled everything after he passed. Another murmured. I heard she manipulated the will. A third added, eyes darting nervously toward Margaret. Emily's mind raced. She had suspected Margaret's cruelty, but now the pieces were falling into place. The billionaire widow wasn't just possessive, she was hiding something darker. The empire Margaret clung to was built not only on wealth, but on secrets, lies, and perhaps even blood. Daniel, torn between loyalty and love, overheard fragments of the gossip. His face paled as he realized the guests weren't just talking about an accident. They were questioning his mother's entire legacy. Emily leaned closer to one of Margaret's estranged cousins, who whispered with trembling lips, "Your marriage threatens her control. She'll do anything to keep Daniel under her thumb." Anything. Even murder. Emily's eyes hardened. The humiliation she had endured was no longer the battle. It was the spark. Margaret's attack had opened the door to the truth. And Emily knew that if she wanted justice, she would have to expose the secrets Margaret had buried for decades. Margaret thought she had silenced Emily. Instead, she had given her the weapon she needed. The ballroom's air was thick with unease. Guests whispered, their eyes darting between Emily and Margaret, waiting for someone to break the silence. The orchestra had resumed playing, but the music felt hollow, drowned by the tension that hung over the room. Emily, her gown ruined but her spirit unbroken, stepped forward. Her voice was calm, but it carried through the hall with a strength that silenced the crowd. "Margaret," she said, her eyes locked on the matriarch, "you've tried to humiliate me, but what you've really done is reveal yourself." Margaret's lips curled into a tight smile. "My dear, it was an accident. You mustn't let your imagination run wild." Her tone was sweet, but her eyes betrayed her fury. Daniel stood frozen, torn between his mother and his bride. His loyalty wavered as he saw the quiet fire in Emily's gaze. For the first time, he realized that his mother's obsession wasn't love, it was control. Emily took another step closer, her voice steady. "Accidents don't come with whispers of murder. Accidents don't come with decades of lies. I know what you've done, Margaret. And soon, everyone else will too." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Margaret's mask cracked, her composure faltering. "You don't know what you're talking about," she hissed, her voice trembling with rage. But Emily didn't flinch. She stood tall, her silence now replaced with truth. The guests leaned in, hungry for answers, their suspicions confirmed. Margaret's empire of fear was beginning to crumble, and Emily had struck the first blow. The confrontation wasn't over. Margaret still had power, influence, and secrets buried deep. But Emily had ignited the fire, and the Whitmore dynasty was about to burn. The ballroom had become a courtroom. Guests leaned forward, their eyes fixed on Emily and Margaret, waiting for the truth to spill. The orchestra had gone silent, the champagne glasses untouched. The Whitmore wedding was no longer a celebration, it was a reckoning. Emily's voice rang clear, steady, and unyielding. "Margaret, you've lived your life behind masks. But masks eventually crack. And tonight, yours has shattered." Margaret's face tightened, her hands trembling as she clutched her pearls. "You dare accuse me, in front of my family, my friends? You're nothing but a girl who married into wealth." Emily stepped closer, her eyes burning with quiet fury. "I married Daniel for love. But I also married into the truth. And the truth is that Charles Whitmore didn't die the way you told everyone. He didn't collapse from a heart attack. He didn't simply fade away. He was silenced." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Daniel's face drained of color. "Emily, what are you saying?" Emily held up a folder she had kept hidden, documents she had uncovered in the weeks leading up to the wedding. Financial records, altered wills, testimonies from those you bribed. "Margaret, you manipulated everything after Charles's death. You lied to your son, to your family, to the world. And now, everyone knows. The guests erupted in whispers, their suspicions confirmed. Margaret's empire of fear was unraveling in real time. Her carefully constructed dynasty was collapsing under the weight of truth. Margaret's voice cracked, her composure gone. You don't understand. I did it for Daniel. For the family. For the legacy. But Emily's silence afterward was louder than any accusation. The matriarch's reign was ending, and justice was finally within reach. The ballroom was no longer a place of celebration. It had become a battlefield of whispers, accusations, and shattered illusions. Margaret Whitmore stood trembling, her once impeccable composure unraveling as the crowd turned against her. The matriarch who had ruled with elegance and fear now looked cornered, exposed, and desperate. Daniel's voice broke through the murmurs, heavy with disbelief. Mother, is it true? Did you manipulate father's death? Did you lie to me all these years? His words cut deeper than any accusation. For Margaret, losing her son's trust was worse than losing her fortune. Margaret's allies, investors, cousins, old family friends, began to step back, distancing themselves from her. The empire she had built on loyalty and intimidation was crumbling in real time. Contracts were questioned, partnerships dissolved, and reputations shattered. The Whitmore dynasty was collapsing under the weight of truth. Emily, calm and resolute, stepped forward. Margaret, you tried to destroy me. But in doing so, you destroyed yourself. Your obsession blinded you. Your lies betrayed everyone who trusted you. Margaret's voice cracked, her desperation spilling out. I did it for Daniel. For the legacy. Without me, this family would fall apart. But Daniel shook his head, his eyes filled with pain. No, Mother. You did it for control. You couldn't stand the thought of me loving someone else. You couldn't stand the thought of not being the center of everything. The guests watched in silence, their judgment final. Margaret's reign was over. And just when it seemed the confrontation had reached its peak, Emily revealed the secret she had kept hidden. The one that would not only end Margaret's power, but redefine the Whitmore legacy forever. The ballroom was silent, every eye fixed on Emily. Margaret Whitmore stood trembling, her empire collapsing around her. Daniel's face was pale, his heart torn between love and betrayal. The guests waited, breathless, for the bride's final words. Emily's voice was calm, but it carried the weight of truth. Margaret, you thought you could destroy me. But you never realized who I truly am. She reached into her clutch and pulled out a sealed envelope. I am not just Emily Carter. I am Emily Carter Whitmore. Gasps echoed through the hall. Daniel's eyes widened. What do you mean? Emily unfolded the papers. Before Charles Whitmore died, he discovered your lies, Margaret. He knew you were manipulating the family, twisting the will, and hiding the truth. He left behind a codicil, a secret amendment to his estate, naming me as co-heir. He trusted me because I was working with him on his final project. He knew I would protect Daniel, protect the family, and protect the empire from you. The crowd erupted. Margaret staggered backward, her face drained of color. No, that's impossible, she cried, her voice breaking. Emily's eyes burned with quiet triumph. You poured hot water on me to humiliate me. But tonight, you've poured it on yourself. Your reign is over. Your lies are exposed. And justice has finally arrived. Daniel stepped forward, his voice trembling but resolute. Mother, I loved you. But love cannot survive lies, cruelty, and murder. Emily is my wife, my partner, and now, the rightful heir. You've lost everything. The guests applauded, their judgment final. Margaret collapsed into a chair, defeated, her empire shattered. Emily stood tall, radiant even in her ruined gown, the true victor of the night. The Whitmore dynasty had fallen, and justice had risen.